Time for another best ball breakfast. It's the Wednesday doubleheader with the BBM3 champ, Pat Kerrane, and Rotoviz's Shawn Siegele. These drafts have been getting out of hand the past couple of weeks. We will see what is in store for today. It's Best Ball Breakfast. I'm Peter Overzet, and these are drafts number 52 and 53 on my road to 150 stream drafts.
Oh, another Influencer 101 for the backward hats, bro. Rigged!
Zach Ertz with no Tyler Algier bringback? Yikes.
You reached around for correlation?
That's a no-no.
You ADP bros disgust me. How about you just live a little?
Handcuffing might actually be a way to get unique if the field's avoiding it.
The Wi-Fi at this resort is a disaster?
These fucking streamers don't have player takes.
What if a piss boy draft is the room you need?
Oh!
Pat Kerrane, how is it going? Every time I do the intro, I feel like I'm doing the bit from last year's Best Ball Bros video where I say draft with the winner of Best Ball Mania 2 and a sack of potatoes. But saying sack of potatoes to Shawn Siegele is just so egregiously disrespectful that I'm really having some cognitive dissonance with it.
Yeah, that's not quite right. Well, I got to start off. I'm going to go ahead and issue an apology to you and Slow Draft Nation. I have entered an insane amount of slow drafts.
Wow.
So that I am now Max the Puppy 2
Oh.
with slow drafts, which I didn't. I like kind of went ahead. I could have like spaced this out a little bit, but I was like, nope, I'm just getting this done. I'm clicking the button until I'm done. Got about I think I have like 130 Puppy 2s going right now, slow.
Okay, this is like, there's one thing, because in our private chat you were saying like, yeah, I've been doing 10 to 15 slow drafts at once, it's manageable. But going from that to 100 and some slow drafts, like what happened? Is it just all the edge in getting in the slow drafts, why a bunch of people fast drafted with less information? Is that the play?
The play was I want to do the puppy, but anytime I was like sitting down, I was like, I'm gonna draft a puppy, I was like, I should just do something else with my time. Yeah. and then I did a few sessions where I multi-tabled. I did one the other day where I did like we did on chip chasing. I did 5 puppies at once, and it was kind of fun and intense. But I was like, I'm good for a few days on that. Like, I don't want to do that again right now. So, I was just like, how am I going to realistically do this? And I got up to about 40 or so slow drafts, and I was like, I can do this. I'm just gonna do it.
So what is it? Because this is the thing, that the dark side of Slow Draft Nation, which I am a card carrying member of, is how long you take to refamiliarize yourself with the team. And I notice when I'm doing 15 to 20 slow drafts, I kind of remember the teams. I'm like, oh, this is the one where this guy fell or whatever. But when you're in that territory, you legitimately can't keep track of all the teams. So how much familiarizing are you doing each time? Are you looking at the team, the ADP board, what your opponent's doing and making? Because that can balloon into a very large task.
No, I'm not going to be doing that much familiarizing, but I do think I have this like other thing that's helpful, which is that like I have tiebreakers based on kind of like what I've been doing, because all these drafts are happening like at the same, like roughly like in the same period. Like I entered all of these, I probably entered 100 drafts at the same time. So they're all kind of flowing, at a similar part of the draft together. So I can at least go like, I've now drafted, like, for example, I was like, I don't think I've drafted Garrett Wilson and Amon-Ra together, like maybe ever. So I'm just going to do that, and then, so kind of breaking ties, sort of like a little portfolio management thing in my head. Like I'll have the like, oh, I don't think I'm drafting this guy much vibe.
Yeah,
more locked in than most other people. So I have that advantage. In terms of what I've done previously on the team, I will have no idea. And what I am doing, though, I'm doing the Davis trick where you star all the correlations, which I've never really bothered to do in slow drafts, because I'm like, I don't need to do this.
Dude, that's a whole job in of itself, starring all the correlations.
Not if you do it after every single pick. If you do it, if you have to go and star when you're 10 rounds in, like, don't bother. Like, you might as well just review the team. But I'm doing it after every pick. I'm dutifully doing it.
See, you and I this is funny because I used to be way more of a slow draft bro. I have gone the other way, Pat. We are ships passing in the sea. I said, should I enter all of these slow drafts for the puppy, or should I just enter the bulldog one time? And I decided to enter the bulldog right before that filled. So I have one draft I'm hawking instead of a million slow drafts.
Well, I did the
Yeah,
bulldog too.
All right, we are underway here in the Best Ball Mania IV draft. We're drafting from the 7 slot here. Obviously, a friends and family draft as always. 10-minute, what YouTube member tier gets me the Discord for draft announcements? That's the Best Ball Value Hounds tier. There is a ping alert that you can check the pin in that Discord, and then you can get alerts. And so there were 5 spots available when I registered, and it looks like you guys were able to fill those. So that is the best way to get alerts. Pat, we are on the clock at 1-7 here. Kelsey, Bijan, AJ Brown, Eckler. What do you like?
I'd be good with Kelsey or AJ Brown here. Bijan's falling so much that I'm waiting.
Yeah, I just got Bijan. Let's do AJ Brown. I got Bijan at like 16 or 17 yesterday, or maybe it was 15 or 16 in one of those drafts that I did. So yeah, he's falling. Is there, again, I only know my Best Ball Mania rooms that are on stream. Is that happening in your puppy drafts, just like across the board? Is he falling?
Oh, I'm getting him a lot at the 8 through 12.
Okay.
Or even 9 through 12, because I usually take AJ Brown ahead of him right now. So I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't know if he would fall to the early second round in a lot of those cases, because I'm just kind of scooping him up. I think he's a really nice pick there. It does strike me that all the running backs are kind of cheaper right now because the puppy is doing its thing.
Yeah. One thing I've been getting a lot of later draft slots on stream. And so the combination of the late draft slots plus my wide receiver avalanche piss boy rooms, I really have been really trying to prioritize the wide receivers early, because I keep getting these gifts at ADP of running backs in the late 3rd, in the early 4th.
Yeah.
In my draft the other day, I sent you guys that screenshot of getting, Devontae Adams, CeeDee Lamb, and then still getting Josh Jacobs, Breece Hall. So that is a very specific calculus that I would not recommend, pass Bijan because of this dynamic. I think it's pretty unique to my live stream rooms, but that is something I've been dealing with, because my guess here, Pat, is at 31, we're going to get a running back we really like.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, that's a good bet anyway.
Mm-hmm. And so this is the spot here of I normally take Olave just knowing it, but I'm open to other things or you could do a Devonta Smith if you want to set up the premium.
Well, what do you think our chances of actually completing that double are?
I think it would be greater than 50% in this room.
I'd be open to, then let's say Olave or Smith. I'm fine with either.
Yeah. Because the Devonta Smith, I'm just not a huge fan of using my first 3 picks on one offense. Is that a blind spot for me? I know the Eagles are good. You don't have to convince me of that, but I'm just talking macro, using that much draft capital on a single offense when we need to traverse 3 uncorrelated tournament gauntlet.
I don't know. I think it's fine, but I don't love it if I don't have the stack. Cause I think if you're in the case where you have an elite quarterback like Jalen Hurts, who I think probably has the highest weekly ceiling of all quarterbacks, then I would really and I've just bet a ton of draft capital on not only his top 2 receivers, but a very concentrated offense to those receivers plus Goddard.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if those guys are the guys you need, you're also really going to want Hurts, and he has so much rushing upside as well that he is going to be harder to replace than most other quarterbacks. So it would be more of a thing where if there was a 75-80% chance of getting Hurts coming back, then I would feel more comfortable making a bet.
The other thing about it too is this spot here where we pick at pick 79 also can line up, or is it 79 or 66, line up with Dallas Goedert's ADP. And then again too, am I really wanting to do 4 of my first 7 round picks on the Eagles, knowing that Goddard is going to be there, because people don't seem to like to grab him unstacked either. So that's the kind of stuff I'm thinking through with that premium Eagles.
I think it's fine, because I mean, you are betting, in order for that to pay off, you need the Eagles to be a historically potent offense, but I think they can be.
Yeah. So let's see here. So we do start AJ Brown, Chris Olave. JGFC from the 2-hole getting frisky, flipping the board with a Keenan, Jerry, Judy 2-3 turn. We also see Do Your Research doing something that I've noticed is fairly popular now. Like, and this is the problem with the reaching stuff. I talked about this with Spags on Splash Play. The Mark Andrews, Lamar Jackson in your head, you're like, oh, this is unique with Justin Jefferson. But I've seen people do this on stream now 2 to 3 times, coupled with seeing you, Pat, post a screenshot of getting Lamar and Mark Andrews at the 3-4 turn. So I just don't like running into other people doing this. This isn't that unique. And you're sacrificing a second-round pick relative to other stackers like yourself.
And we're going to get values on Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts in this room.
Yep.
So now what is Casey? Because he's got both guys available here. He's got Diggs and Smith. But he did a version of what we talked about with Sigmund Bloom, where he has 2 outs to the elite quarterbacks and both elite quarterbacks sitting here for him. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
He snipes us.
Yeah, which is weird because I would always break the tie in the favor of the player.
Yeah, me too.
Sunk significant capital, and that's a mistake there. Do you want to go Henry or Stevenson?
I like Breece.
Okay, you're Breece over. Obviously, you have your ranks in here. The only thing, Pat, is Breece is falling, and I do like playing the ADP game a little bit. Although Breece,
if you want to go Henry, I'll go Henry.
So that's my only thing, Pat, is Breece Hall's been falling to like the 3-4 turn in all of these. And in these drafts, I mean, it's unlikely Breece comes back, but I just am kind of breaking ties in favor of that right now because sentiment is down on Breece.
I know. Yeah. My feeling is like, I want to be like thinking through the big stands that I'm making. And Breece is one that I've kind of just like checked in with my cell phone a couple times. And I'm just like, yeah, it seems like fairly like obvious to me that one of the main reasons to have drafted at this time of year was to scoop 3rd round Breece. Like getting Breece at a similar price to where Kamara was going last year when we thought he might get suspended for 6 games and was already flashing signs of decline because he might miss week 1. But we don't even know that. I don't know. It just seems like a smash. But Henry there, I mean, Henry, that's a pretty sweet value on Henry too. So
yeah,
I have no issues taking Henry.
Yeah, and that's just kind of like the ADP. And I think it's because I know, Pat, I'm just going to end up with so much Breece.
Yeah.
Where if you do think about the way injury stuff can go, don't you think it's a little easier for Henry to rise than Breece? Just like sentiment news base?
Yeah, although I think Breece is being priced like he's truly uncertain for the start of the season. And I think like if it's kind of drumbeat, like, no, like he's maybe he plays like 50% of the snaps in week 1 or maybe even 40%, but he's going to be out there. I think he will not be the 311 or whatever.
Yeah. All right, Pat, we're about to be on the clock at 4-6. Our team so far: AJ Brown, Chris Olave, Derrick Henry, best available per your ranks: Jahmyr Gibbs, Mike Williams, Christian Watson, Drake London. What stands out to you?
I'm fine with the receivers. I think we want to go with the receivers. I don't mind going Williams and maybe trying to set up a Herbert thing. I do that a lot.
Yeah, we could do that. Shawn has me so spooked on Mike Williams.
Okay, we don't have to do that then.
Do you like Watson here?
I like Watson, yeah.
I feel like Watson in a piss boy room going a few picks past ADP feels somewhat interesting. I guess the other thing I've been thinking about a lot, and you mentioned the Herbert thing, is if we would end up wanting to do the multiple detour early. Like, so that's the one thing I think about. In a normal room, I normally allow myself 2 detours, like right through 7 rounds, and then getting those 5 wide receivers.
I'm fine with 3 in a normal room.
See, in a normal room, but in these rooms, you can get buried. Like if you do 3, and so I'm thinking through, if we have Henry, if we end up liking a tight end value and the Herbert stuff, then we could just be really weak at wide receiver through 7 or 8. That's the only thing I'm thinking through.
Yeah. No, I'm used to. Sometimes you'll get caught out if you take 3 detours early, but you can usually get away with 3 in the rooms that I'm in.
Where are you? Who has been? So if you're doing 3 detours, are you generally able to grab the last of that, like Rashod Bateman, Zay Flowers, Elijah Moore tier? Is that how you're able to pull that off?
Yeah. And I'll take some Sutton like as a wide receiver 5. And occasionally I'll go into the double-digit rounds with only 4 wide receivers. I would say that happens more than I would like it to, because I end up in a spot where I'm like, I'm not taking Michael Thomas here, so whatever. Right. I was just looking at a team that has Darnell Mooney as its wide receiver 5 on a Justin Fields team, which is not fun. But there are wide receivers in round 12, 13, 14 range that I think are like solid picks that I am like, okay, if I need to get to like 6, let's say 7 wide receivers by like round 15, I can kind of build that out where 3 of those are double-digit round picks, but I don't like hate the room, and I have some more early running back firepower or whatever it is.
And I do think one thing that I've been starting to think through a little bit more is like team specifics as it pertains to structures. So if I'm setting up for like a bit of a punt QB build, all of a sudden like the Giants and Daniel Jones become a priority target because there's like 5 legitimate stacking options for him late. Whereas say teams like the Dolphins and the Cowboys, where there are really very little stuff, then I prefer to not be having to chase wide receiver in those rooms, knowing I don't have like really easy double stacks available.
Right.
We are on the clock though. Justin Fields with a huge slide in this room.
I mean, I guess we could, but what are we doing with him?
Yeah. What else?
I'd be more inclined to go Hawkinson as the slider.
So if we go Hawk, I think we are locked out of elite quarterback in this build, which I'm completely fine with.
Hawk's correlated at least.
Hawk's correlated gives us another out to a mid-tier quarterback, right? We now have Derek Carr, Jordan Love, and Kirk Cousins all viable with these 3. Right. And I don't think we'll be able to afford passing on a wide receiver at 66.
No, we have to go wide receiver at the next pick, I think. I mean, that's a nice value on Fields, but
yeah,
it's also a nice value on Hawkinson.
Yep. It is. It is a nice slide there. And then you do, obviously we have no DJ Moore in that selection. You can do backdoor stuff with, the Bears. There are the running back options, but again, it goes back to that detour thing. And like, which detour do you value more in that situation, the tight end or the quarterback? But because of the correlation tiebreaker,
and as far as breaking tie, like what if we took Drake London? Then I think, maybe we go Fields, which is maybe like a silly way to do it in some ways, but I think it's also not silly because you set yourself up for a really nice bring back, and you're going to end up building a field stack anyway.
Wait, and is it that when we all bandy about the most cliche term, using it as a tiebreaker, like those are literally the exact spots where we're like, both of these look good. Let's use the correlation as the tiebreaker here.
Both are ADP values. Both are detours. Yep. Yeah.
So definitely like some wide receivers available here. We could, depending on what Shawn does here, we could potentially set up the Kirk Cousins double with Jordan Addison, or we could do Evans.
I think we do that.
The Addison.
I think we set up the double.
Yeah. I like that. All right. So our team here through 6 rounds, we've taken 2 detours. Our wide receivers are AJ Brown, Chris Olave, Christian Watson, Jordan Addison. Got a mid-3rd round Derrick Henry anchor and a sliding TJ Hawkinson elite tight end there in the 5th. Got some correlations going, and we shall see what is available for us at pick 79. We might be able to grab the end of that tier.
Yeah. So what are you seeing? Like, who is typically available for you in the mid-7th at wide receiver? Are you already to like Bateman by that point?
Yeah. In these rooms, this room did seem to normalize a little bit. After like the Keenan Judy stuff.
Quentin Johnston went in the 6th round. So
yes, but that I think is a little correlated toward Amy here setting up that stack.
Yeah.
But no, we see, Mike Evans, Kadarius Toney. Mike Evans is at ADP there, but you'll see a guy like Jahan Dotson, a little bit of a reach. But everyone's kind of doing their correlation thing. You see, do your research, grabs Dotson with his Ayuk stuff.
Right.
So I get it.
Yeah, we're like a half round ahead of schedule, I would say.
Right. Yeah. Well, we're gonna have a wide receiver that we like here. Kyle Pitts sliding in this room. You got to think one of these guys take the Pitts value here at pick almost a full round past ADP. Crazy, looks real nice. These are some of the teams I've been doing. We see Lewenbrew here. Where's Lewenbrew with a 1-5 gets the anchor Barkley, a little discount there, 5 wide receivers, and then you're able to still grab the elite tight end. It does just really line up nice. Oh, that's not Lewenbrew. This is Lewenbrew.
Oh, this is Lewenbrew. Okay.
Yeah. Connor. Yeah.
Oh, he took
Lewenbrew grabs Pitts. Yep.
Well done.
Let's see who else is falling. Damian Pierce falling in this room. That's not surprising. So it looks like we're looking at Cooks and Flowers here at the end of this wide receiver tier.
I kind of like Cooks
or Elijah Moore. I'm starting to warm up to him as well. He might come back. Doubt it.
I'd probably go Cooks. Yeah.
Yeah. Cooks also sets us up for another mid-range quarterback selection. Right. Dak is a guy who tends to fall in drafts. If the CeeDee Lamb drafter doesn't grab him, like he'll fall a full round.
Interesting. I haven't drafted a ton of Dak. Where are you seeing him go?
I've been getting him I took him on the draft with Spags yesterday, completely unstacked because he fell like 20 picks past ADP and I hadn't taken a quarterback yet. And so I ended up scooping him up, but I'm happy to take Dak when he falls, around past ADP, preferably correlated. I didn't love just because, like I said, there's so few options. I end up with just a skinny stack with Dak and Jake Ferguson a lot of times if someone reaches on Michael Gallup, which doesn't feel great, but I don't mind a nice discount on him.
Yeah, he's interesting because I don't like the switch to McCarthy there at all. Apparently, McCarthy's giddy calling plays. He's so happy right now, just loving life. But I don't trust that at all. I don't think McCarthy's sharp.
Well, this is the whole thing with that. And I agree with you. It is super concerning. But if it is the whole establish it thing, it's one of these running backs who isn't being drafted is a smash. If they are truly going to establish it, we all love Pollard. Pollard's going to smash. But another one of these running backs is going to be a sick value. And so it's I'd prefer to capitalize on that. If you're out on the passing game, I want that second running back.
The problem is that it might be Zeke.
Right.
So you can't even, count on being able to pick the right guy.
Let's see here. We are about to pick. We are on the clock now, Pat. We got running backs, Pacheco, Rachaad White, James Conner, Javonte Williams, James Cook, wide receiver wiped out.
And so at running back, I like White for a little mini with Olave. Pacheco also a value. And then we could go Dak, I guess, but it seems a little early. I
think we can wait on Dak. Why don't we break that tie in favor of Rachaad White? I guess the only thing I'm starting to get a little worried about with White is they do seem like a candidate to potentially bring in a Dalvin Cook, Kareem Hunt, Zeke type, and that's giving me just a little pause. Not that it makes me worried about Rachaad White's production, but just knowing if that happens, we're going to get 11th round Rachaad White if that happens.
Yeah, that's probably where it would settle. Yeah, that's fair. I think one, we know it's not Fournette. I don't see how Dalvin would want to go there. I don't see how Zeke would want to go there. I think Hunt is probably the guy that would make the most sense. Where it's maybe you reunite with Baker and no one else is really.
I forgot about the Baker connection there.
Yeah.
All right, Leah, the chat now I didn't even know that you guys were entitled to pours, but I am thirsty and I do have some coffee left. So here you go, you sickos. There it is. The coffee pour for the people here. What did you make of this? Starkindler pointing out the Rams made some cap space today. Didn't they restructured Cooper Kupp's contract?
Oh, I didn't see that. I was starring a bunch of teams in the puppy.
Yeah. So who knows what they're doing? There was some talk of are they making a run at DeAndre Hopkins, which would be hilarious considering their cap situation and team situation. But maybe they think they can run it back one more time, one more magical Super Bowl run.
Wow. There's a blurb today about Breece Hall maybe not having a seamless return. Athletics.
Cheaper Breece Hall. It's coming.
Yeah, cheaper Breece Hall. Athletics Zach Rosenblatt said he's skeptical that he will have a seamless return. It doesn't appear to be based on anything other than Zach's brain.
Yeah. I mean, 10-minute referencing a Dalvin Cook spot. I mean, purely depth chart wise, like I could see it from their perspective, but this whole thing about Dalvin being like, I'm not taking anything less than, what was it, like $5 million a year or something like this. It's like, who is out here running to clear up cap space to give Dalvin Cook a fat contract at this point in his career? That seems,
I think he's done.
Insane. He has
I honestly
to be.
think he's done. He was not good last year. He's getting older. These running backs, when it goes, it goes.
So our team here through 8 rounds, no quarterbacks. We got Derrick Henry, Rachaad White at running back. Our wide receivers, A.J. Brown, Chris Olave, Christian Watson, Jordan Addison, and Brandon Cooks. Our tight end is T.J. Hawkinson. Couple more picks until we are up here. Want to check the board to see what the quarterback situation looks like behind us. Starkindler has Watson. Amy has Herbert. Austin has Allen. And Stepfathers has Fields, and Shawn has Mahomes. The CeeDee Lamb drafter is Stepfathers. He could definitely be in contention. I'm guessing Dak is not going to come back from him twice at 1.5 and 1.12.
Yeah, he won't.
Dak is at the top here. Slight ADP value.
Yeah.
The only other thing with it, and because we're in this spot, I mean, Kirk Cousins is still an option for us as well. I really doubt this room would take Kirk Cousins. The Justin Jefferson drafter is on the other side of us. So the only reason to pass on him, it'd be if there's someone else you like and you wanted to do like a Derek Carr and Kirk Cousins duo instead.
I would rather do Dak, and then if we get sniped on Cousins, we could always go to Love.
Right, exactly. We do have one other safety net there. I do really like when your kind of quarterback stacking options cascade like that, ADP wise.
Yeah, and I think Dak and Love feels fine. I think Dak and Love is a better room than Carr and Cousins.
Yeah, I agree for sure. So our team here, we do now get our first quarterback, Dak, stacked up with Brandon Cooks. Also, we can start to think about some potential Detroit bringbacks if we'd like here for our Week 17. Otherwise, fairly balanced build as far as how we've kind of allocated capital to the positions.
Yep. This is also one of the situations where, like, if we were to get sniped on Kirk Cousins here, we are in a really nice part of the draft for running back value. And we only have 2 running backs. So it's like, I'm not like worried.
Right. And because what it does is, I mean, you've talked about this, you've written about this on Legendary Upside of like, we still have the Viking stack. And what is the easiest, probably one of the easiest quarterbacks to replace their quarterback production would be a Kirk Cousins type, where it's like, okay, we build out a Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed thing with Jordan Love double. Now we have that stack, the Dak stack, and a Minnesota stack just without the quarterback. And we know Dak.
Well, we already have Watson too. So we
exactly.
So Love makes it, we're easy. Real easy to double Love.
And I would just say, like, you know, even what we just talked through here, if we did want to play it that way, we could. If we had a running back value we really liked and we wanted to push it, knowing we have the Carr Love outs, I think that would be viable. So we'll have to see what you like here at pick 114, or if we just want to select Cousins 5 picks past ADP.
At this point, I would say we probably would go Cousins, but because there's no one really that has fallen, but I'd be fine. Yeah. Let's take the value, the slight value, double stack.
I still love Rashod Penny, but again, just playing like the market element, all of the sentiment I hear out there, I think Rashod Penny is going to start getting cheaper. I like Antonio Gibson a lot, but this still feels like a relatively flat tier with some options coming later. So I think we just probably don't screw around and get Cousins, right?
I think we just get our double stack.
Lock it in. So now we are most likely done at quarterback. I won't say never, but Dak and Kirk at quarterback, Derrick Henry, Rachaad White at running back, A.J. Brown, Chris Olave, Christian Watson, Jordan Addison, Brandon Cooks at wide receiver, Hawkinson at tight end. So we got that nice double stack with Minnesota, the bring back on Green Bay, and a skinny stack with Dallas, as well as the Chris Olave, Rachaad White mini. So doing pretty well on the structure and correlation so far.
Yeah, it feels pretty nice. And I don't really build a ton of like Dak. I don't know that I have a Dak Cousins, so it's kind of fun how you build something that's not your typical thing, but it still ends up nice correlated and
because it
logical.
sounds like you don't do a ton of Dak builds on.
I don't do
your
a ton of Dak. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I take a lot of Anthony Richardson, and he's falling.
Yeah.
He often falls to the 9th now. So I've kind of made with my general thing is like when I see that start to happen and I'm overweight a guy, I just say, all right, I think I'm good on 8th round Anthony Richardson.
Let me give you a thought experiment. Say you're at the 112 and you grab CeeDee Lamb, and say you haven't selected a quarterback yet, and at 108, both Dak Prescott and Anthony Richardson are there, big ADP fallers. And in this hypothetical, it doesn't work because you could theoretically double tap them both. Let's just say, let me get my actual hypothetical in. Okay, let's say you're at 107 instead, and you know the other guy behind you is going to take one of them. Which one are you taking? And you have Lamb.
Well, if I have Lamb, I'd probably take Dak. But I would be scoping out the other drafters to see if they have quarterbacks already. Because I would be, if I thought I could maybe get both, I might take Richardson and try to push Dak around the corner.
Yeah.
Because Richardson's the guy who you're like, I'll take him unstacked. They'll figure it out later.
Yeah. And even I in that spot, I might, just as an ADP bro, might take Richardson. Because in that example, Richardson's a bigger ADP faller than even Dak. So it's an interesting thought here. All right, we do see some of these running backs go off the board. Eli Mitchell, Gibson, Penny, Kendre Miller, Khalil Herbert. Actually not a bad spot here for wide receivers, Pat, for our kind of taking a couple detours. We missed the really sweet spot for 0 RB targets. Do you like a Mingo, Moore, or Rashi here?
Yeah, I'm good with especially the first two.
More correlated with AJ Brown. Do we want to do that?
Yeah, let's do that. I think that works.
Where are you at on Rondale Moore's efficient ADP? Obviously, the release of Hopkins, the ETR ranks, a lot of things screaming him up draft boards. Do you think there's still meat on the bone here, or this is about where he should settle?
This feels about right to me. I think ETR still has him about a round ahead of this, which I struggle with, just given that I think he did play a lot last year, but he is a slot like in his natural NFL role. He's a tiny man, and it's a really bad offense, really bad offense. So like, I don't even know who their week 1 quarterback is going to be, because Colt McCoy's coming off an injury, right? So isn't it potentially like some rookie or something?
Yeah, I didn't realize. I knew Colt McCoy was coming off an injury. I didn't know that he might not be ready for the start of the season.
I'm not sure he's a lock for the start of the year, because when we were doing the big board plus super flex, I was like, should we be drafting Colt McCoy? And then I looked into it and I was like, I don't think we can draft Colt McCoy. So
is this a real person?
Clayton Tune.
Someone in the chat. Clayton Tune.
Yeah. So that seems really gross to me. And then you get to the end of the year and it's like they could be completely tanking. So I mean, and they're gonna have to tank pretty hard to get the number 1 pick over the Bucks. So, we could honestly see, Rondale's tweaked his hammy. I don't know. I know I'm like deep in the narrative street now, but it's just tough when it's out of an offense.
You've been hanging out with Davis too much, talking about Greg Dortch here. Do you want to grab the Rashee Rice slight dip, or do you like a running back here?
I like Warren.
Warren?
I love drafting Warren.
Yeah. Let's do it. What is your overall take? I would say use the examples of both Jaylen Warren and Jerome Ford. Other than drafters just kind of waking up and finally realizing they're the locked and loaded RB2 with basically no other competition. Is there anything driving that ADP rise? And does it give you any bit of pause? I mean, we're not in territory where it's like, a bunch of people got 17th round Jaylen Warren, therefore you can't draft him. I don't think that at all. But do you still think they are maybe slightly undervalued even in this pocket?
When Jaylen Warren goes in the 11th, and I have taken him there just as like I really need an RB3. I feel set everywhere else. Maybe I have like a Geno thing, and I'm like, it's not a great value, but I'm getting a bring back. I don't love that, but I will do it occasionally. This feels fine to me. I wrote about this on Legendary Upside where I was saying, like, especially this time of year, I think paying a bit of a premium for these running backs that are clearly the number twos and also are insulated from signings. Like Warren, they're not going to sign Leonard Fournette. They have Najee Harris. He already is Leonard Fournette. It's like they're like the same guy. So, and they spent the first round pick on Harris. I think that protects Warren in a sense. Like they're not looking to add to the room. They probably feel pretty confident. Plus Warren played really well last year. So so that with that, like if you can get a guy who's got that contingent upside plus, maybe occasionally mixes in, scores a touchdown, hits your lineup, whatever. It allows you to also like take stabs later that aren't where you're just completely guessing, like I don't have to wade into, the super ambiguous backfields later on if I don't want to. I can tack on a third tight end or something like that where I feel like, hey, at least this guy is starting.
Yeah, for sure. And, as our third RB, I think it makes a lot of sense. Derrick Henry, the anchor, Rachaad White, a guy that, we're going to be banking on some early season production from, and then Jaylen Warren. You can really have it both ways with him. Notice how I didn't say have your cake and eat it too, trying to wean myself off of that one. You can get the standalone value, which I think he will have some touches in most game flows. And then also, just like you said, the massive contingent upside if Najee goes down.
Yeah.
All right, we are on the clock here. I definitely like the Roschon Algier, kind of a flat area here at wide receiver. What do you like?
I'm at running back here.
Yeah. Do you have obviously you have Roschon ranked a tick ahead. Any other correlation tiebreakers here?
I don't really see any.
Arizona.
What's the full running back list look like?
Roschon Algier, Foreman, Mostert.
Yeah, I'm good with Roschon. Or Algier.
Yeah, the only reason to maybe go Algier over Roschon is if you say, hey, I like playing it through Foreman and he'll be available.
Right. That did cross my mind. I like Foreman too. I think Foreman's a good pick.
Yeah.
They're all good picks. I think the Bears running backs are all really good picks.
I believe I need to check my exposure, and I can maybe check that in a second. I'm pretty sure I'm over 50% Miami Dolphin running back exposure and over 50% Chicago Bear running back exposure across my drafts.
They're going to run the ball a lot. I think they'll be a better offense than they were last year. And I think all three could be good. I know Roschon's good at pass blocking. I don't know how good he actually is as a running back. But
isn't that crazy? They had the highest run rate in the league last year, almost 60%. And all three of their running backs are free in drafts. That's pretty crazy.
It is pretty crazy. And Deontay Foreman was awesome last year as a rusher. Khalil Herbert led the NFL in NFL Next Gen's rush yards over expected per attempt. He didn't get that many attempts, but he was really efficient. And Roschon Johnson is kind of the clear passing down guy, and he's got size, so he could be, a high value touches type dude. So all three, I think, are really interesting individual plays. I've taken two. I think in one, someone sent me a screenshot of a draft where I took all three in the poodle. I was like, I guess I was having a little fun there.
Yeah, exactly. This was the only, I guess, looking back, doing some armchair quarterback on how we played quarterback. You do see Derek Carr fall to 152. Jordan Love here now falling around past ADP, maybe just like the slightest regrets, but there were just no really obvious 2v2s, I think, that we were passing on there to otherwise. I guess it would have been the Antonio Gibson type pick.
Antonio Gibson, yeah. Algier, that kind of stings.
Yeah.
You know what? LaPorta is pretty interesting here as a bringback.
I like the LaPorta. Here's one other thing just to talk through. Would you be okay with a 3 tight end build if we do want to get the double stack with Cowboys tight end later, or do you want to be done at quarterback or a tight end with LaPorta?
I'd be fine tacking on Ferguson as a third tight end if you want to do that. In the 18th round, like those picks are such low value picks anyway. And we're going to be 2 quarterback here. So
yes. I agree. I like that. So we do select LaPorta. It does give us that Detroit bring back. And LaPorta really is. I was talking about this the other day on Best Ball Breakfast of why I'm just like a little queasy with Jamison Williams. And I think I had a Lamb share, and people were like, why aren't you reaching to grab that bring back? And part of it is because I think Jameson Williams like spooks me a little bit. And also because LaPorta is now so appropriately priced for a really nice bring back in most builds. So I've been getting a decent amount of LaPorta lately.
Yeah, this is where I think the LaPorta type pick makes a lot of sense, and where I basically think Dalton Kincaid should also be going, but he will never go this late. But this is like, okay, you have an elite tight end, and you're basically looking for, some spike week upside at the end of the season, plus a guy who's going to play, a decent amount over the course of the year. LaPorta fits that really nicely. Or you're doing a 3 tight end build, and the hardest thing to find is like a legitimate late season breakout upside. So you got that with LaPorta. What you don't need from a 14th round pick is a guy who's like a locked and loaded week in, week out starter.
Mm-hmm.
I think where Kincaid goes, you're kind of like, you're close to needing that, like at tight end. If you're going to spend a tight end pick there, like you're kind of saying, well, at least this guy's a locked in NFL starter. And he's like totally not.
Yep, I'm with you on that.
Where did he go here?
Who's that?
Kincaid.
Let's check here. He doesn't slide that much.
11th, yeah.
11th, yeah. So, and now you start to get the digs like pulled out funkiness, and everyone's like,
right.
All right,
he's a riser, if anything, yeah.
Yeah. I will just say this right now, Pat. I would maybe be interested in the 3 quarterback build of Jordan Love at pick 175. I'm just going to toss that out there.
All right.
But I'm curious though. I think structurally we can afford it. I don't feel like there's any position that we're super behind the 8 ball on, but it does probably tilt us away from the luxury Ferguson pick. That's really kind of what you're balancing.
I think we have the green light to do it. Let's do it. It's a hell of an ADP value. We have him correlated with his best receiver.
Mm-hmm.
And we have 3 pocket passers, I would say. No disrespect to Dak's mobility, but he's not like a true dual threat. So,
yep. And it did seem like when we were thinking through the Ferguson and the Jordan Love stuff, both of those were like, okay, structurally, you don't necessarily have to devote extra capital to the position based on what we've done at them, but then using the huge ADP faller as kind of that tiebreaker of where you allocate that. And again, I'm not even saying we can't take Ferguson still. I guess it will come down to, we have 3 more picks. And let me just recap our team so you guys understand what we're trying to talk through here. We now have 3 quarterbacks: Dak, Kirk Cousins, and Jordan Love. Running backs: Derrick Henry, Rachaad White, Jaylen Warren, Roschon Johnson. Wide receivers: AJ Brown, Chris Olave, Christian Watson, Addison, Brandon Cooks, Rondale Moore. Tight end: Hawkinson, LaPorta. So with 3 more picks, we're definitely probably 1 more running back and 1 more wide receiver. I think we can get to a 3-3 build at the onesies if we want. I mean, what do you think?
We could, yeah. I would say I would be more inclined to spend it at running back or wide receiver. I think you could argue that we could, we got 3rd round Derrick Henry. So you can definitely build it like it's a kind of classic hero running back build where we took him first. But in terms of draft capital expenditure, we waited until the 8th for Rachaad White. Jaylen Warren was the 12th round. Roschon Johnson, was 13th?
Yeah.
So we have not spent a lot at running back. We could pretty easily justify going to 6 running backs here if we wanted to. So, and then obviously if we get to, 9 wide receivers, or 8 wide receivers, that would also be pretty nice. So.
Yeah. And I guess what we can start to do is using some of the, the board and the players as the tiebreakers, right? Where we don't have to make any positional selections just for structure. We can draft who we think are, the best players available, I think, which is nice. This is probably one of the most balanced builds I've done. Like when I look at all of these and I'm like, yeah, we could just do 1 more pick at running back, 1 more pick at wide receiver and be completely fine just on how we've kind of, and when you do get a couple ADP values, that's where you do start to feel super balanced, right? Because it's almost like you're sneaking in an extra pick there.
100%.
I love Chuba.
I love Chuba too. I will note that Gainwell correlates.
Gainwell correlates. Chuba also correlates with Green Bay in week 16, just tossing that out there. I mean, what I like both. You make the decision here.
Let's go Gainwell. I think there's a chance he's a riser as people, because the beat writers are talking him up as like, I wouldn't say like talking him up in like a huge way, but they're just saying like, here's what I know is going to happen. Kenny Gainwell is going to make the team. DeAndre Swift's going to make the team. They don't say Rashaad Penny, which is concerning if you have a lot of Penny like me. But then I'm like, oh yeah, he did crush in the playoffs. And he does know the system super well. And he was a good prospect. And he's explosive. And he can catch the ball. So maybe, and the beat writers don't think he's clearly the number 3. But we're like, well, he clearly is, though. He definitely is the number 3. There's no chance he's not the number 3. I don't know. I think there's a chance we're wrong about that. So, and I talked about this on ADP chasing yesterday. A guy in my Discord got me to kind of rethink it. And apparently I need to go listen to Around the NFL, because apparently Greg Rosenthal is a big fan of Kenny Gainwell. Rotopat was saying that on Roto World Football Show.
Gainwell, like from just like a news and information like perspective of how his like roller coaster has been, where it's like, we all liked him last year as a 0 RB target. Hey, this guy's going to catch passes in a good offense, gives us a floor. Then did like hardly anything in the regular season. Then like crushed in the playoffs, like was a very valuable, big part of their offense. Then they bring in DeAndre Swift, who has, I would say, a lot of kind of redundancy, a little bit skill set wise with Gainwell, and Rashaad Penny. And then everyone's kind of like back out on Gainwell again. Now you get like sketch stuff on Rashaad Penny, and Gainwell has no risk of losing his job, being cut, whatever. And now it's like, okay, now I'm kind of back in on Gainwell again.
But why doesn't have Gainwell? Why isn't he at risk of losing his job? Like, you know what I mean? Like, why are the beat writers so confident that he's not going to lose his job? Like, the fact that they signed Penny and Swift would make me think, under normal circumstances, that you would expect this day 3 role player to now be on the chopping block as a cut candidate. So I find it encouraging that they're like, no, he's a lock. He's going to make the team. So
yeah,
he sounds like he's a part of the plans to some extent.
So we have 2 more picks here at the turn. Let's see what we want to do here. If one of these is a wide receiver, Pat, is there anything you like at wide receiver? I am laughing. Someone took Jake Ferguson. So I assume we want to get to 7 wide receivers in this build. You could do like the Greg Dortch, like the double up thing with the Arizona. If there's a tight end you like for our 3rd tight end, we could do Trey McBride as well.
We could also do like a Fournette thing at running back. And like, I think he's another potential riser if he signs somewhere, which I think he definitely will.
I'll let you talk me into it. I went ahead and slid Fournette just because I think structurally we could have made a case for any of those. What do you think now for our last? So we're at a 3-6-6-2. I don't think we even needed to get to 6 running backs in this build, but
we didn't.
Man, there was nothing standing out.
No, the wide receivers are just so picked over. And Fournette's like, if he signs somewhere and he's going to chug along and do stuff, like that's his whole deal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think we need that 7th wide receiver now, though.
Okay. Let's check the board here. There is Nathaniel Dell correlated with our big dog share, which is kind of interesting. The steady drumbeat on him from camp has been pretty good. In this range, we are just trying to correlate. Yeah. Any other like Dell versus Dortch? Do you have any leanings?
Not really. I would lean Dell, I think, just because we already made our bet on Rondale, and they feel like they kind of run counter to each other. Yeah. Hardy would be someone I normally just like to mix in. I guess, does he correlate with anything? No.
We don't have any Chargers or Patriots on this team.
Yeah. Quez is like part of this Eagles thing we have going on.
Yeah. I really don't tend to not click Quez unless it's with Hurts.
With Hurts. That's how I feel too.
Someone sent me a screenshot of Michael Wilson going at like pick 80 in one of their drafts. So your steam from, was that last week or the other week,
Yeah,
is really
so.
catching on. I like
Let's do
Nathaniel Dell. Yeah.
Rookie
Like
wide receiver. It's kind of the right archetype here for us.
All right, Pat. This one is in the books. Fun. It's weird to be in a room where you aren't like, for at least for me, where I'm kind of like scrambling to catch up at a position I'm behind on. Like this one, we basically for like 3 rounds kind of shrugged our shoulders on which position we needed. Our final team, we do end up here with 3 quarterbacks: Dak Prescott, Kirk Cousins, Jordan Love, the huge ADP faller there, 22 picks past ADP. Got to a 6 running back room with Derrick Henry, Rachaad White, Jaylen Warren, Roschon Johnson, Kenneth Gainwell, Leonard Fournette. I mean, a full spectrum of running back archetypes right there in that room. Our wide receivers: A.J. Brown, Chris Olave, Christian Watson, Jordan Addison, Brandon Cooks, Rondale Moore, Nathaniel Dell. We did get to those 5 wide receivers through 80 picks, which felt good. And then Moore and Dell, I feel like, round out that room nicely. And then tight end, just Hawkinson and LaPorta. What are your overall thoughts on this squad?
I like it. It's a fun squad. It's correlated in a number of ways. We have little minis with like the Derrick Henry, Nathaniel Dell. We've got this Eagles Cardinals thing without the quarterbacks. We have all 3 quarterbacks stacked with a bring back. And I kind of like the 6 running back build here, given that we played what the room was giving us. You know, I think like Fournette there. Also, I think Fournette strikes me as another guy. I mean, you could say Zeke, who was also there at the same time and we passed on. Maybe he would have been a better pick because he was more of an ADP value. But both those guys could be one of the reasons to draft right now. You know, they're probably signing somewhere and they will move up when they do. And I mean, I think they're definitely signing somewhere. Like Zeke and Fournette are not retiring. So
no, they are not. They are not. I am fine sprinkling in some Fournette. I will not be. I know there's closing line value to be had with Zeke. When you're right, what are you winning at least with Leonard Fournette? Like Leonard Fournette could sign with the Chiefs and just like immediately be like on the field for like 60% of the snaps in catching passes and all of that. But I just really don't see the path to Zeke being a guy you're excited to have on your team weeks 15 through 17. I just can't see it.
Zeke has looked done. Fournette has not looked done. He's looked kind of big and slow, but he looked big and slow in 2019. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like he's
exactly.
It's not anything new. And he catches passes really well. He pass blocks pretty well, and he's pretty good at the goal line because he's massive. So I mean, if you're in that situation where wide receivers completely picked over, I mean, I think we probably would have taken Nathaniel Dell where we took Fournette, right? There wasn't anybody that really jumped out in the 17th. So we went ahead and grabbed Fournette. And I do think like Derrick Henry, when you see Derrick Henry, you're like, okay, we have our hero running back. This is a 5 RB build, but we skipped the kind of late dead zone and go to like the 0 running back range, the early 0 running back range with Rachaad White. And the fact of the matter is that Derrick Henry was our 3rd round pick. So it's not like we need to build it in terms of draft capital allocation. Like he's a hero running back. It's like a bonus if he turns out to be a superstar.
Yeah. The only thing, like looking at that team, I do wish like if we call Leonard Fournette kind of a structural luxury pick, I would have preferred it to be Ferguson just to get that double stack with Dak. But I'm glad we're not forcing it with fucking Hendershot.
Also, he would have been sniped. Didn't he go? Yeah.
Yeah, he did. So yeah, I like how this team turned out here. Pat, I want to quickly before Shawn joins us here, I do want to mention something that Fantasy Life is rolling out today that I'm super excited about. We now have the Best Ball Hub, which is a completely free place to upload your underdog CSV from your exposures and get to kind of take a bird's eye view of everything you've been doing in drafts here. This is at fantasylife.com/tools best ball hub. I'll drop a link in the chat here. It's just the same way as getting your exposure. Otherwise, you can go and see your exposures across different teams here. Ball Mania 4. You can go look at my Dalmatian team, obviously a single entry, so I have 100% there. And then you can start to put in combos here as well. I can see what my those look like. You can see which build types you have in them.
Oh, nice.
The price you got them at. So like the current ADP versus the average ADP you've selected him. See your team stacks, which partners on the Broncos you paired him with, and as well as, of course, the week 15 stacks, 16 and week 17 stacks. So very, very sweet tool here from FantasyLife, all completely free to use. And yeah, very excited to start to dig into some of the data here. Have you, Pat, started to like think about, because people have been starting to ask me, are you now starting to think about your exposures in your positions now that you're over 50 drafts? Are you to that point, or are you still just kind of getting your guys and not worrying about that?
I've been looking on Underdog at some of the exposures that I have to get a sense of, you know, are there guys that I'm like really underweight on? Like, I think I was looking at, I was like very underweight on like Garrett Wilson for some reason. And I was like, what, how did that come to be? Like, I like Garrett Wilson, but, I've only done like 25 Ball Mania drafts, and I think it's just like a little early to get like too worked up about the exposures right now. So yeah, I will probably do like another 5 drafts and then do a deep dive. Although I guess this puppy endeavor that I did is going to kind of make things tougher, because like I've taken a bunch of Garrett Wilson there because I was underweight, but that won't hit my official exposures until next month.
Yeah. I know that's the thing about the slow drafts is you got to wait for them to finish, and that applies here too. You need the team to be finished, and then you can always re-upload the CSV. The other thing I really like about this too, as far as like sweating in season. So say there's a week where you have like your Jalen Hurts and Goddard, those guys go off. So you want to see, all right, let me see the teams where I have Jalen Hurts and Goddard. And I also, now I see, okay, I only have, I have a handful of teams here. I can click the team name and specifically see the rest of the players I have around them, which is cool too. If you're trying to figure out your sweat, you know, Hurts and Goddard go off for 2 touchdowns, pull it up and be like, all right, we're rooting for Jamar Chase as well. We're rooting for Evans. So definitely mess around, play with this. I do have a tutorial video up as well, kind of walking through all the different things you can do.
You're very excited about this.
I am very excited for the Best Ball Hub. And I do have I have an article up on FantasyLife as well, going through ways to use this and kind of the reasons why I think reviewing your exposures helps. Like one that I flagged, Pat, that I thought was interesting is I mentioned how I'm super heavy on the Dolphins and Bears running backs, but I noticed that I was a little light on Roschon, like compared to like my Herbert stuff. And I almost kind of want to cascade my exposures on those backfields to where I'm overweight the cheapest guy. And I actually had way more Herbert than I did Roschon. And so that was like one of those little things where it just catches it for me, where it's not a huge error. It's not a big thing, but I'm like, all right, I want to maybe pass on Herbert a few times to make sure I'm balancing that out with Roschon.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Because like, I don't think I'll speak for myself. I am not very good at sort of naturally keeping track of those tiebreakers. I'm like, these guys are all basically equal, so I'll take them equally. And then I'll look and I'll be like, I've never taken the third guy. I just take, I just don't, it just hasn't happened. So I think like the reason to look at the exposures and stuff is to make sure that the plan that you are executing matches the plan that you put in place in the first place, that you're actually following through on what you wanted to do, rather than like constantly second guessing yourself. It's more about like, I feel strongly that these guys are about even. Why do I have 75% of one and 25% of the other?
For sure. Also, Pat, I'm just laughing here looking at, I just randomly did the Jalen Hurts Goddard, and then remembering this is the team we drafted where you got me on Michael Wilson as our bringback. 7%.
Closing line value, buddy.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Pat, appreciate you as always. What do you got going on at Legendary Upside? You, of course, updated your ranks. You now have DraftKings ranks. Anything else that people should be checking out over there?
We have Dynasty ranks now with Davis Maddock and Jacob Sanderson. And in the process of doing a podcast series with those guys, talking through those ranks. We did an episode where you can listen to the podcast wherever you get your podcast, Legendary Upside Podcast. We talked through the rookies, where those fell in the overall rankings. We're going to be doing another 3 episodes on the Dynasty rankings over the next few weeks. So if you're in a dynasty, tons of great content there. I'm also working on a couple articles. I had a really long article in the late rounds and my philosophy on kind of attacking the late rounds, especially this time of year, thinking through some things we could do later in the summer as well. And then had an article, a completely free article on a quarterback tactic that I'm using right now if you're drafted from the top half of the board.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that article. And I've mentioned this before, even if you aren't taking the plunge yet to subscribe to Legendary Upside, just drop your email there and make sure you're at least getting the free post. Pat had a really good one too. It kind of dovetails with that idea of the little trick of taking, Devonta Smith along with Diggs or Kelsey in your draft where you're giving yourself multiple outs to quarterback. And the stuff you wrote about, Pat, too, I think really comes in handy even for slow drafts where you have more time to kind of hawk the other side of the board, really figure out what your teammates or your opponents are doing, and then leverage that by pushing quarterback maybe a little extra than you normally
exactly
would.
Yeah, and it's in an environment where the ADPs on all the quarterbacks are headed down. So I think if you're going to push a position, then push one that is overall undergoing a bit of a slide, because you kind of want to say how far is the slide going to go. And so I kind of dove into like a specific way that I think you can capitalize on that.
Awesome. Well, Pat, we're going to let you go. If you guys want more of Pat and I, you can tune in to Ship Chasing tonight. We still need to figure out the logistics, but one thing I do know is Mike Leone and I will be out running in the dark while Gretch and Pat are on the 1s and 2s of a draft team. Last year, this ended up being an iconic stream when Leone went out for a run on one of our drafts. And I said, I want to join you for this. He sent me the glow sticks. We're ready to go, Pat. Looking forward to that tonight as well.
Amazing.
I'm
so excited.
Yeah, so tune in. That's Ship Chasing, 9:15 p.m. Eastern. Right now, we are going to bring on Rotoviz Shawn Siegele. Last week, the draft we did was absolutely out of control. Excited to see what we get up to today. So for Pat, check him out at Legendary Upside. Pat will be here every Wednesday at 10 a.m. drafting with me. We'll catch you next time, Pat.
Later.
All right, welcome back to the Best Ball Banana Stand. I'm your host, Peter Overzet, joined as always every Wednesday here on the stream by Rotoviz's Shawn Siegele. Whether you are watching this on my YouTube channel or listening to it on the Rotoviz airwaves, we are excited to have you with us. Basically, every week, Shawn and I are jumping in a Best Ball Mania 4 draft. And Shawn, if last week is any indication, we are going to continue to have to battle wide receiver avalanches. That's what we're dealing with this year.
We are. And last week's draft was a pretty fun way to do it. That's probably the draft I'm most excited about of any that I've done so far this season. But I'm going to be a little distracted today, Pete, because all I'm going to be able to imagine is you and Leone running on Ship Chasing as we're doing this draft here.
Yes, I never promised that it's going to be the best team, that it's going to be the best quality stream. I can't promise that, but I can promise chaos. I can promise just a wild night. So yes, Leone did it pretty well last time. I have no idea how it's going to work out. Self-service, bobbing camera. It's going to look like I'm in the Blair Witch Project or whatever. But yes, it will be some fun tonight. Shawn, have you done any of the Underdog Cardio Club type stuff? Because that, of course, now getting very popular. It actually closes this week. But do you ever do any exercise while drafting combinations?
I haven't yet. That's a good idea. I've got all kinds of activities planned for this summer, more or less to distract me from eating as I try and go from 235 to 175. We'll see if that works. But most of them are, well, I mentioned before that my goal really is to get where I can have ice cream while I'm on the treadmill while I'm watching the game. So we'll see if we evolve to that point.
I will say I did a cardio club draft on stream yesterday, drafting a team, and it really, like, was it miserable? Yes, but it's less miserable. Running for 50 minutes while drafting is much better than just running for 50 minutes while doing nothing else. So I do like that hack as far as, trying to make it less awful. But Shawn,
Did you still have blood to your fingers? Were you able to make the clicks? Well, sometimes the fingers can get a little tingly there as you're running beyond the.
Well, I got shamed from people. What I do for the Underdog Cardio Club is when I'm on the clock, I allow myself to throttle the treadmill down, and I go down to more of a walking pace, make my pick, and then throttle it back up. Now, sometimes the chat will get mad at me and they want me to just keep running, but I have to draw a line somewhere. If I have sweat, I do need to just be able to confidently select the button. You know how it goes?
Yeah, that is good. You got me fired up for it now. I'm going to have to do a little bit of that on mine. How many drafts do you get in there as you're doing the, I guess it would just be one. Have you done any ultra marathon drafts there?
I haven't. I've done a couple where I would do back-to-back on, so you end up doing like an hour 30 on the Stairmaster, which will, it's rough. It's rough, but I just one in there, I think this idea of, like, we all spend all summer drafting teams. And so if you can make some of them, vaguely healthy or justify it, it seems like a good trade-off there. So
then you can come back out and break out that tank top. So you're
exactly. These are our new Best Ball Breakfast tank tops as well. I think I have it pinned in the chat here as well. We got tank tops, we got shirts, we got coffee mugs. I even got my coaster here, Shawn. So we are ready here for Best Ball Breakfast, and we are ready for our Best Ball Mania 4 draft. Shawn, I hopped in this just a second ago. We are going to be drafting from the 1-9 here today. How are we feeling about this draft slot? I do see a lot of badges, a lot of friends, so I know what we're in for here.
Yeah, the 109 should be a lot of fun. And what I was going to propose to you, I mean, obviously we'll play the draft as it comes, but this would be a fun day to do a pure 0 RB team, which obviously the wide receiver avalanche pushes us in that direction. But also, depending on what exactly we get and how far some of these running back values fall, there are a couple of wide receiver names, I think, outside that range you and I have been discussing that have gotten a little bit more interesting. And so if we even wanted to do a little bit of a hyper fragile and then come back with a lot of wide receivers, I could see that as well. And I think both of those are viable from the 9th slot. Again, a little bit depending on who goes in these top 8 picks.
Yeah, and I mentioned this with Pat earlier and people who tuned into my Best Ball Breakfast on Monday. So, Shawn, I was picking from the 12 classic wide receiver avalanche room. I started with Devontae Adams and CeeDee Lamb, and then it was so wide receiver heavy that I got Breece Hall and Josh Jacobs at the 3-4 turn because so many wide receivers went before. So I have been in these rooms from the back end specifically, been liking to go wide receiver, just knowing I'm almost for sure going to like the running back at pick 33. But I don't ever want to box us into any specific strategy, but I just have noticed that trend that, again, I said with Pat, it's not necessarily applicable to every draft, but it is very applicable to my stream drafts.
And certainly if you have the wide receiver, running back, that's an approach that historically hasn't worked particularly well because you're not getting the anchor RB and then you're drafting in the dead zone. But obviously those trends no longer really apply in 2023.
Yep. I think what I am going to do, not that I don't like having Pat's ranks. Did you have updated ranks this week? I didn't get to check my email before.
I only updated them a few minutes ago, so they're not officially in our.
Okay. What do you like here? Diggs does fall to 9. Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, the running backs here as well. What do you like?
This for me would be Robinson or Garrett Wilson.
Garrett Wilson. All right. I want to hear you talk about Garrett Wilson. And I know you had a comment last week that someone flagged in the comments, and I wanted to expand on it, where you said the first round wide receivers aren't that strong, and that surprised someone. And I want you to kind of expand on that because clearly that dovetails with passing on Stephon Diggs at this spot.
It does. And, Diggs has generated a lot of controversy from the antics at the end of last season, whether or not he's going to practice with the team. It looks like, those things are more or less going to be fine. And yet Diggs is also going to be very reliant, I believe, on this combo with Josh Allen, which isn't necessarily the way that I want to go early when the value is at running back and the structure is so dependent on being loaded up at receiver. And so I kind of like getting some of these guys here early who you might go separate from the QB, or you're setting up late QB opportunities. The other thing with Garrett Wilson is you're setting up this possibility with the Commanders, the week 16 element. Not that we're going to do Commanders every time. Obviously, we don't necessarily want that, but it is something that is kind of an out late if we're looking for some values there. Diggs, and then especially AJ Brown, as much as we love him, there are risks for those guys to where I think that Garrett Wilson, when you look at what he did with the quarterback play that they had, Peter just put out an Elijah Moore-ish article yesterday, and just every time you go back and you work through what the Jets were dealing with last year, it just blows your mind. Garrett Wilson, I think, is a justified guy really as early as the 5th receiver off the board.
We are on the clock here at 2-4. I want to continue that conversation by ADP. Jaylen Waddle, Jonathan Taylor, Barkley, Olave, Devonta Smith. I love Waddle. I think you love Waddle. Anything else jump out to you?
No, I think that is the way to go there. And it even gets us a little bit of that initial advance. We can get as many of our teams into the semis as possible. I really like that element of it. Then some of the other things could come into play, but that Wilson, Jaylen Waddle start, I think you have two guys who are actually threats to be the overall wide receiver 1 this season. When you look at both of the Dolphins receivers, they played lower snaps than you might have guessed last year. They ran fewer routes. Now, they were targeted so heavily on the routes that they did run that perhaps the volume doesn't really go above that anyway. There's a limit to the number of hits that you want them to take throughout a game, the number of times they're going to be sprinting those 60 yards with the ball. But both of those guys actually could outperform what they did last season. They were both top 5 wide receivers early before Tua had the injury elements. Waddle to me should be at the very least a borderline first round pick. Now, I mean, he's obviously going early in the second, but I have a hard time with him behind actually guys like Stephon Diggs and Devontae Adams.
And I think, for people who, even myself, who get anchored to ADP, I think this might be, how could you take these guys over Stephon Diggs or Devontae Adams? But one way I know, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but tell me if this is how you think about it as well, is you're constantly trying to think about where are these guys going to go next year? How is their 2023 season going to position them? And my guess is you think AJ Brown and Diggs probably slide a little bit in ADP heading into next year, where you could see Garrett Wilson being right up here at pick 1-3 after Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase as this next generation, where it almost kind of follows. There's almost like a delay with dynasty ADP and then the redraft catching up to it, where it's like dynasty drafters were taking Jefferson and Chase there like last year. And then the current community comes around on it for redraft. My guess is you think Garrett Wilson can be like a top 3 pick next year.
Definitely. And Ben Gretchen and I do a series on this every year for Stealing Bananas. And it's usually the one that listeners have the most fun with. And I mean, obviously you're going to miss a little bit when you're projecting the very top guys, but it's remarkable how accurate you can actually be when you're taking those young super talents to move up, because they do. And you want to limit how far you reach, and you do want to be aware of ADP and where you can get these different combinations. And yet being on the young guys, especially if they're that good, is a key part to staying ahead. You mentioned Dynasty. I think it's interesting because when you contrast Dynasty and redraft best ball rankings, there's so much information there. One of the things in Dynasty, you can sometimes see guys who are young, who are a little bit higher in a redraft, and the Dynasty community is saying, let's wait and see. But if the player is going to be a value, they're going to be a value in this particular season. So anyway, there are exploitable edges when you contrast those two elements.
For sure. All right. We are going to be up here in the 3rd round. We have started our draft with Garrett Wilson and Jaylen Waddle. Some people might say we started our draft with 2 second-round picks. Shawn and I are saying we started our draft with 2 2024 first-round picks. So it's all a matter of perspective. Shawn, looking at the board right now, Josh Allen is sliding in this room. Josh Jacobs available, Calvin Ridley, Deebo Samuel, Amari Cooper, Najee, Keenan Allen. So we're going to have some options here Josh Jacobs does go. I know you like ETN. Does this feel like still like a wide receiver pick for you here at 3.9? I know there's some options we like.
It does. I think that we have to go receiver here, and probably Allen is the preference. There are so many things that he allows you to do. He's undervalued. He's the rare veteran star receiver who, I mean, the price on is just pretty surprising.
Yeah. I agree with you on that. I don't know what it is, because underdog drafters are willing to go very wide receiver heavy, but for some reason and I've noticed it with Keenan, I've noticed it with Godwin, I've noticed it with Evans, and I do think there is some of that lingering age bias. But man, when you juxtapose him with Calvin Ridley, in the profile you're getting with Keenan Allen in that offense compared to Ridley, where there is so many unknowns, him in this new offense coming off of the year layoff, it is bizarre to me that Ridley routinely goes over Keenan.
Well, you look at Allen's profile and where he has been consistently with those wide receiver 1 finishes, and then you look at last season, and I mean, he's right there when he played, especially down the stretch, at that same level. And you have the injury last year, which I think is possibly the thing that's pushing people off. But previous to that, he had gone through this extremely long stretch of missing hardly any games. So I mean, I don't think that Keenan Allen is an injury risk per se, and the value there is pretty extreme.
We are back on the clock here at 4-4. DeAndre Hopkins, Christian Watson, Jahmyr Gibbs. My guess, knowing you, is you're between Hopkins, Watson, and Gibbs. Is there anything else you would float here? Judy?
No, I think that Gibbs is the way to go and give us that running back so that we have at least one player in that range. We talked a little bit about going pure zero RB, which I think would have been fun if we could have gotten Judy to come back those last handful of picks.
Yeah, I agree with you. That Keenan Allen, Jerry Jeudy, Week 17 mini correlation is starting to get very popular. We saw a team in the previous draft with Pat do it from the early second or the late second round, and then immediately grab Keenan Allen coming back in early third. So people are definitely onto that one. It would have made sense with this team. We do grab Jahmyr Gibbs as an anchor here. Sammy pointing out for the YouTube watchers, 343 watching and only 74 likes. Can we get some likes on the stream for Sammy? Appreciate you. The zero RB builds are very fun, but I'm guessing, Shawn, again, what you're wrestling with here is just this tier being so flat over the course of the next 15 to 20 wide receivers off the board.
It is. And I think that these guys, as we come through this stretch, and it really depends for DeAndre Hopkins where he goes. There are some spots that, I mean, you're going to look at him and say even late second probably makes sense. The more that you learn about him, though, and the personality, he's probably going to go somewhere where he's not quite ready, or there's going to be either weak quarterback play, or he's going to be in a battle for those, wide receiver 1 types of targets. And so from that perspective, he gets a little bit trickier. The next group of guys, I think, are more round 5 receiving picks. And so even in a wide receiver avalanche draft, I don't really want 5th round values at the 4-3, whereas Gibbs is probably a value in the middle of the 3rd. Now, again, it's a little bit different in an avalanche draft, but he's somebody who not only is a value there, but the more I've been working with exactly how the positions break down and where the tiers are, I think that he's the end. And then you don't really want another running back into that, almost that round 9 range. So if we pass there, we either don't get a running back or we reach for somebody who, you could always get that 2022 Miles Sanders where a really unlikely profile pays off. But if you chase those, you're just building bad teams.
But Kenneth Walker is an exception for you in that range, right?
He is. And I think that you really want to bet on the talent. And yet, with what they did with Charbonnet, I think that he's probably a little bit overvalued as a talent. And so I think that you're getting Walker knocked down a little bit too much. And yet, even if Walker has a big talent edge, the Seahawks have already sort of committed to this being maybe not exactly a committee, but I've become a little bit more worried about how that could work out. I don't want Walker to need an injury to his backup in order to become the league-winning type of play that he should be.
Yeah. We might have the spot depending on what the Mike Williams drafter does, Ryan Hodge. I don't think I've heard you talk a lot about Justin Herbert, who is maybe often available around this range. I know with your heavy Keenan stuff, I know you like Quentin Johnson. Is Herbert a priority target for you right now, or are you still just enjoying playing everything through the late quarterbacks? Herbert does go, but I am curious what you think about him.
I like playing it through the late QB. You worry a little bit about leaning too heavily into something that historically hasn't worked that well and leaning too heavily into individual players who are very risky. And yet you get so much additional value. And I mean, drafters are really asking you to play those late quarterbacks. I also think that Herbert is one of these guys who, I mean, you and Pat were talking about it to conclude the previous stream. I mean, he's going to fall. And I think that you really want those later prices.
All right, Shawn, we're on the clock here at 5-9. I have tabbed over to just wide receivers, tight ends: Kittle, Lockett, Evans, Deontay Johnson, Pitts, Addison, Burks, Goddard, Tony, Pickens, Dotson. What do you like?
Yeah, I think going with either of the Steelers receivers or probably either of the Steelers receivers here.
Yeah, let's do that. I guess the calculus here. So if we are going to go late on quarterback, there's nobody we would even be really considering in this range anyways. Fields, Lawrence, no stacking there. We've already talked that we're probably going to be kicking the can down the road at running back. So then the big question is, do you make potentially a detour for tight end here in the early 6th, or do we continue to hammer wide receivers? I've been thinking a lot about like the detours you make in these rooms, and generally I felt like I could get away with 2 detours from wide receivers. So maybe a running back, maybe a tight end, maybe a quarterback. Would this be a room where you would be willing to take a tight end detour, or do you want to keep hammering wide receiver, do you think?
I really like Pitts and Goddard for what they could do this year. My question would be how far you think they can fall. What are you seeing in these avalanche drafts? Is there, I mean, obviously by ADP, they wouldn't come back to us. But if people get locked out at receiver and are chasing a little bit there, do we want to try and get that? One of the things with Pitts is he also opens up a path to one of the really late quarterbacks and also probably pushes somebody else off of them a little bit. So you create a little additional safety. I do think there's probably a receiver here who becomes interesting enough that I would go that direction if he doesn't get taken these next 2 picks.
Yeah, and I have been seeing the tight ends fall. I want to say, someone in the chat can remind me, in the draft we just did with Pat, I want to say Pitts fell all the way to pick 77 or 78. So you will see some of these guys slide in these rooms. So yeah, Pitt's definitely still available here, right? It would be a little bit ahead of ADP. So there probably are better draft slots for us to get our Kyle Pitts exposure where we can capture that slide into the 7th here. What was the wide receiver who was standing out to you? Is it the double tap on the Steelers?
That would be an option. I have a lot of that. That's pretty fun. Dotson was the guy I was thinking of. Lockett also actually a little bit interesting. He's somebody I have very little of. I'm tending to be on JSN, but Lockett is a locked-in veteran who doesn't have to make any kind of leap. He just has to stay there.
Dotson or Lockett?
Let's go with Dotson.
Okay, let's do it. Dotson today, I don't know if you got a chance to see the quote that was floating around. I don't know when he did the interview, but it seemed fairly recently. And he said pretty emphatically, Sam Howell is our quarterback. Basically said, I don't think there is much of a quarterback thing. So when you have players coming out and saying that, I remember when George Kittle said it about Brock Purdy last year, I kind of, my ears perk up because I know there's been some Jacoby Brissett talk, but if John Dotson is just saying he's our quarterback, it seems like that's pretty close to solidified.
Yeah, and they came out, the coaching staff, and said, we're going to give both guys some first team reps, probably. And you almost wonder if even just that was to take a little bit of the pressure off of Howell and say, look, go out there, don't worry about having to be this locked in starter, but also we want to see you compete. The drumbeat out of Washington has just been pretty extraordinary. When you have the backup quarterback begging the coaching staff to play you, and then that guy, even as he's leaving town, is saying this guy is a star. I just have the other thing too is that going into his final season, a lot of people had Howell projected as a top 10 pick. He goes out, rushes for like 800 yards, rushes for 800 yards. We're talking about fantasy football where everyone wants rushing quarterbacks. He rushes for 800 yards, bizarrely falls in the draft despite being an elite prospect, goes to Washington, looks fantastic in the preseason, looks fantastic in his start, His teammates all claim that he's a star. I mean, I don't want to destroy the end of our draft here, but how is Sam Howell going where he's going? It's utterly absurd.
All right, yeah, chill out on the Sam Howell love for now. This is actually another topical thing that I just had to pull up because this must have just happened. FF Doom asking, do we think Bateman is going to slide? I don't know if you saw this, Shawn, but it says Bateman receives a cortisone shot, expected to miss minicamp. Did you catch that? Is that maybe impacting a way you think about the Ravens right now?
I don't know, even thinking about the Ravens. It's devastating, though, because I mean, Bateman is one of these guys that I have quite a bit of exposure to in Dynasty. He's tricky to rank and to select in redraft right now because they've added all these other weapons and because you don't know where he is. But it's really frustrating. It's really sad because he looks like a big-time talent, and we just may never find that out at this point.
I know he just seems like one of those guys that's forever snake bitten. And it's just so easy to tell yourself a story of how it could work out if he was fully healthy, just from the glimpses we've seen. So that'll be an interesting thing to weigh, whether I assume we're going to start to get an incoming dip on him. For me, Bateman had represented that end of the tier before it really falls off a cliff, him, Elijah Moore, and then all of a sudden you're into Michael Thomas, Sutton, Juju range. I wonder if he now does kind of push closer to where, say, like Jamison Williams is going, where people are like, hey, I might not get these first 5 to 6 weeks, but I like the profile for end of season stuff is how I could see that shaking out. We are about to pick at pick 81 here at 7-9. Our team right now, no quarterbacks, no tight ends. We got our anchor running back, Jahmyr Gibbs, and then we got 5 wide receivers, Garrett Wilson, Jaylen Waddle, Keenan Allen, Deontay Johnson, and Jahan Dotson. Lo and behold, Bateman top of the queue as far as best available wide receivers. Anything jumping out to you here, Shawn? Kind of a gross part of the board.
It is. I think that DeAndre Swift is just so dynamic, and the upside there is monstrous. I mean, especially in an Avalanche draft, maybe you'd like to get even a little bit better price on him, but he is below ADP. That takes away another fun way to play it. We have, I think, another receiver option, but probably a guy who will come back to us in the next round.
Yeah, I feel like these wide receiver Avalanche drafts, everyone's starting to get like a little smarter, a little more used to them, where, we would get some of these insane running back followers. And now you have enough people in these drafts who are saying, you know what? No, I am going to grab the value. I am going to grab these running backs I like. And then you find yourself on the board there where it's like, there's no screaming ADP values. There's no wide receivers we like. There's no quarterbacks for us to stack. There's no tight ends for us to select. And so you are just kind of then taking your best available player there. So interesting spot there. But Jahmyr Gibbs and DeAndre Swift, the old DeAndre Swift and the new DeAndre Swift, both on the same team.
It's just so much fun. And those receptions, not only do you still get a half point for them, but they're going to be out there in space. Both of those guys can make huge plays when they get into space. You have a chance for a lot of the big plays that, they generate the stats for the full season, but they also have that spike week element to them. They can, win the week for you. They can win tournaments for you. I mean, really with Swift, the thing is, can he stay healthy? But the numbers for Swift were crazy last year when you consider how injured he was. If he were to stay healthy in this Philadelphia offense, I mean, this is one of those guys, we talk about doing that exercise where you project forward to the next season. I mean, DeAndre Swift was one of those guys where you're saying, okay, he's going to be the 109. Now we're getting him in a great offense in the 7th round. So
yeah. All right. What do you see on the board here? You mentioned a wide receiver. I'm curious if he's still available there. Some running backs on the board. Darren Waller is kind of interesting. I don't know where you're at on him. What do you like?
Let's go with Waller.
Okay. Yeah. Let's talk about it. It seemed like you maybe had some hesitation there. One thing I've been thinking about Waller, and I actually just put out a best ball tip video here of the Giants on rooms, specifically where you're not as wide receiver heavy. I think Waller is a really interesting selection because it can open you up for Daniel Jones. And then you have, depending on how you feel about the Giants room, a plethora of late stacking options where you just have 4 to 5 guys who you can do. And as a way of like, hey, I've taken a couple of these detours and I still want to get shots at an elite ceiling at quarterback and tight end. I kind of feel like the Giants unlock that a bit. How are you viewing Waller in conjunction with the rest of, let's say, that mid elite tight end tier, the Kittles, the Goddards, the Pittses? Is he closer to that tier for you or closer to the Freiermuth types?
I think he's closer to the Freiermuth types, but he's one of these players with just a huge range of outcomes. And I always like to chase that, at least to an extent. We know that when he's completely healthy, he's more or less uncoverable. He's a guy that you have to double team because the bigger defenders simply cannot stay with him. And the smaller guys, when you throw the ball to him, are absolutely dwarfed. You look at some of the things, especially when Derek Carr was really at the top of his game with Gruden, where you have that element that, I mean, it's Waller and Waller and Waller and Waller. And you read about what the Giants are currently doing in some of their practices, how insiders think that the team is going to break down. I mean, I like some of the late receivers there in terms of Hyatt, in terms of Wan'Dale Robinson. I think those guys are going to be good. I think that the Giants offense is going to take a step forward. But if there's one guy who comes out and really dominates everything, it's probably going to be Waller. And if he does that from the tight end position, that gives you another little additional benefit.
Yeah. And I do, I know you've been, playing through the late tight ends. I do think we're going to end up being in a sweet spot where other than our Keenan Allen, every single one of our wide receivers or pass catchers that we've selected, their quarterback is still available on the board. So we're going to have a ton of options if we find ourselves in flat spots of the board to kind of scoop up potential stacks there. So that's kind of a nice little bonus for us just with this team we built. We have tons of quarterback stacking outs. Yeah.
And if you go with a 0 RB team and build it that way, I think it's a lot of fun. It opens up a 2 QB build, it opens up that 3 QB build where, from a tournament perspective, if you can win through different QBs as you're going along, then you maybe have a little bit more uniqueness against the final field. So I love that element that you're just describing. I think it's an underrated part of how you want to do 0 RB.
Yeah, for sure. And normally, I think we've seen in previous years, right, when the quarterbacks were cheaper, and also in managed specifically too, like getting that elite quarterback and elite tight end with 0 RB has been like a very, very powerful strategy of, hey, I'm going to beat you at every single position except RB2 essentially, or RB1. This year with the quarterback prices differently, I do think it's changed that calculus. And now you're constantly weighing these kind of decisions with the detours. But I think the way we've done it here with Waller getting 2 running backs we like and now having all these quarterback options, I don't think we're going to find ourselves squeezed like we were last week, right? Where we were having to take guys 40 picks ahead of ADP out of structural reasons. So that's kind of a nice bonus for where we're at now.
So we do have that question with the QB and the elite receiver of,
yes,
do you want to go that route when the QB just objectively is wildly undervalued? There is also a deeper receiver that I don't want us to reach too far for, but I don't want us to miss. My question for you, without giving the name here too early, it doesn't open up a correlation play. It would open up another QB play. Is that something you would be more or less against here?
I think we should go Tua because I also don't think it necessarily boxes us out of a 3 QB build if we still want. Like, if we want to do Tua with 2 late, even if we ended up liking like some Daniel Jones value or whatever, I think there's a lot of different ways we can play it. So we made a big bet on Jaylen Waddle. We both think Tua is massively undervalued. I say we pull it in here.
Perfect.
So we do stack up Tua with Jaylen Waddle a few picks past ADP. This is something that'll happen if the Tyreek Hill drafter passes on him because he took Jalen Hurts. It basically, a lot of people do not like to take an unstacked Tua. And so you could have maybe even argued, Shawn, that we could have even tried to push Tua to 112 here, but I didn't see anything else like really glaring at me that would have, made that the best choice.
And I think because of the way that we're set currently, there are multiple names to come back. And since we're not that far away from our pick, I like going ahead and locking Tua in, even though I do think he would have come back.
I think you're right. One thing looking at, Alex had 0 quarterbacks through here, but he has more options as well. He's playing for Denver, New Orleans stuff there. So he might not have even have done it. So yeah, always tough to weigh that. positionally here, so we're going to be picking at 10. We're through 9 rounds. We have Tua stacked with Waddle. Our running backs are Jahmyr Gibbs, DeAndre Swift. Our other 4 wide receivers with Waddle are Garrett Wilson, Keenan Allen, Deontay Johnson, and Jahan Dotson. And we got Darren Waller at tight end. So structurally, very similar to where I was with Pat in the last draft. Very balanced here. We don't have to chase any positions. I think we can go and get out who we think is the best player here. Talk me through this upcoming selection as we're on deck here.
Well, Kerrane has a ton of upside right there. It doesn't look like they're going to be hit by Dalvin Cook, which, I mean, that can always change. But if they're not, then Kerrane is a huge scoring play almost either way, regardless of what happens with Javonte Williams. I also think that Romeo Doubs is a really interesting selection here if we wanted to get close to finishing out our wide receivers before we really hit this massive dead zone.
Yeah. I think it's a good call out because I do not think Doubs in this room is making it back. Who do you want, Kerrane or Doubs?
Let's go with Doubs here.
All right, let's do it. He's an interesting one. It seems like, his ADP is obviously ahead of Jayden Reed's, and yet I feel like my sentiment indicator is that people are more willing to play the Packers offense through other non-Dobbs guys. It's either, I want to tack on Jayden Reed, or, I'm just going to do something skinny with Watson or the running backs. Talk to me about Romeo Doubs, because I feel like from a discourse perspective, he's almost kind of a forgotten man. He doesn't get talked about a ton.
It'll be so interesting to see where we end up with Doubs, because he was the player who flashed far beyond Christian Watson during the offseason last year. And then he was the guy who had this elite rapport with Jordan Love. And you would watch their preseason games. Doubs was running all different types of routes. He was open on every single play. Love was looking to him on every single play, peppering him with targets. He was scoring touchdowns. You get into the regular season, there are a couple of misconnections with Aaron Rodgers, and suddenly it torpedoes what looked like it was going to be a fantastic Doubs year. And then you have Watson, who obviously was their earlier pick, made some big plays, and Watson has just this unbelievable athleticism to where, he's a touchdown waiting to happen every time he touches the ball. And so he gets pulled up into that 4th round range where I think he deserves to be. But you do have a little bit of a risk with Watson at that price with an unproven quarterback. And when we're trying to load up on those foundation receivers and we're trying to both minimize the risk, create the upside, I do think that there's some mild red flags there. And then you have Rodgers leaving. The other thing is that Rodgers just played extremely poorly last year. So I think we could get actually a boost with Love as opposed to, you have much more risk, but Rodgers was terrible. So when you're evaluating specifically the guys who played with him just last year, you've got to look at it from the perspective of they were playing with a bad quarterback. And once you kind of mentally make some of those adjustments and think through that, Doubs becomes a little bit more interesting. But then the drumbeat out of their OTAs is that Doubs is basically right back to where he was in preseason last year, where he's the guy. If he's going to be the guy with the Packers this season, and he does have some sort of sneaky athleticism as well, then it goes back to that conversation that we have a couple of years ago with Debo versus Brandon Ayuk, where Debo was the cheaper guy. Last year, obviously, both A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith hit, but Smith was a really good way to play it to minimize your risk in case the hybrid element there does torpedo some of the volume elements of the offense. I think that Doubs is going to emerge as a really good way to play that Packers team, which not that you're hoping to play them as much as those other 2 offenses that I just mentioned, but I do like him as being a guy who could be a wide receiver 1 in a range where we're starting to get names that are pretty unsavory.
Where does Jayden Reed fit into all of that discussion about ways to play the Packers? Do you just think it's going to be hard for him to make an impact in year 1?
I think that it will be. He doesn't really have the profile of a guy you would expect to necessarily do that. He had some good seasons. He had some, weird or disappointing seasons. I think the top couple spots are more locked in than people realize, and that seems to be the reporting as well. Sometimes the logic and the reporting go in different directions. I think when the logic and reporting seem to go in the same direction, you sort of want to respect that, although we're just so early too, and how teams are working through what their 2023 plan is going to be. That could change very quickly.
We're about to be on the clock here at pick 129. This is our 11th round pick. Definitely some running backs that I know we like here. Rashaad Penny, although I don't know if we would do him and Swift together. Maybe we would. Khalil Herbert, who you and I have selected before. We could do Aaron Rodgers with Garrett Wilson, but we have so many quarterback options late. What do you like?
I like Penny unless you don't want to go that route. There are obviously both pros and cons to doing it.
I'm not opposed to it.
Okay. Let's go that direction. The reason I like this, Pete, is because I think that both of those guys, even if they both stay healthy, they score in ways in which you actually like both of them. Right. Individual players could then, again, you think of the tournament, one guy could get you through 1 week, one guy could get you through the next week, but they're both undervalued, even if they both stay healthy. If one of them gets hurt, if one of them gets hurt, then you really would prefer just to have that guy on the team.
True.
But this team I really like the way this team is coming together. I think that gives us additional floor, but this gives us a great way to play the scenario where they stay healthy. And that is a legitimate scenario, even though both guys are in this range because they're so injury prone.
Do you have any, I'm guessing obviously wide receiver avalanche room, but also some stuff about Penny potentially being either a cap casualty, starting the year on IR. I assume you've seen some of that chatter. Do you think that's just noise, that Penny's talent will kind of win out here? Or how are you feeling about him in general?
I think it's a talent will win out situation. I also think if he ends up somewhere else, then, you could argue that makes our team even better. If he's done, then it's not a great pick.
Yeah. We're about to be on the clock here. Yeah. Pick 136. Aaron Rodgers still kicking around here. Jaylen Warren, wide receiver, best available was probably Alec Pierce, and then a pretty flat tier. Tight ends, Schultz, Dulcich. What do you like?
How about Dulcich? You feel like adding another tight end?
Yeah, no, I'm definitely good with that. This feels like a flat part of the board. Talk a little bit about passing on Aaron Rodgers. We do have Garrett Wilson. We're making a huge bet on him. I do know we obviously like some other late quarterbacks. We have multiple options late. Talk to me about passing on Rodgers there.
So I think that Garrett Wilson is so good that he can score. If Rodgers has a good season, he can score if he has a bad season. I don't necessarily like the other Jets passing weapons. And so I think it will be very concentrated on Wilson. I think that Rodgers is one of those guys without the overall play volume and all likelihood, obviously likes to snap the ball as the clock runs out. And without the rushing, he's going to be a guy who's really hard pressed to have a strong advance rate. And then you're really looking at him mostly in his value being a spike week in the tournament. But even then, if we can push to some of our other receiver connections, I think that the quarterbacks actually have more upside, definitely when you adjust for price, and it allows us to put somebody in there with Dulcich where you have that week 17 game with Keenan Allen.
Yep, that is another nice thing there. You do have a couple options with the Keenan Allen, with the Broncos. You kind of have Dulcich. Is Mims already off the board in this one? No, Mims still kicking around here in Tim Patrick, but I like Dulcich. He's been a guy I've been gravitating to a decent amount. How much do I have of Dulcich here? A little over 13% here. Should be 14% after this draft. So yeah, definitely been in on Dulcich. To recap our team right now here, we have a 1-3-6-2 build. We have Tua stacked up with Jaylen Waddle. Our three running backs, Jahmyr Gibbs, both Eagles backs, DeAndre Swift and Rashaad Penny. The rest of our wide receivers been talking about Garrett Wilson, Keenan Allen, Deontay Johnson, Jahan Dotson, and Romeo Doubs. Tight end, Darren Waller, Greg Dulcich. Again, pretty balanced here positionally. Nothing that we're really having to catch up on.
Yeah, and it gives us a lot of flexibility there late. It's almost like a case where I think there are so many great late tight end options that if we had had a good name where we picked Waller, my preference there would be to take another receiver, but I just don't think that there were really any options that would have made any sense.
I'm with you. And, in non-Avalanche rooms, like this could be an Elijah Moore selection. I think he can sometimes be there around pick 88. If you didn't have the Rashod Bateman stuff, had a little more confidence there. Maybe he is there as well, or maybe he slides there. So yeah, it was a it was a rough spot there. And man, even the running backs available at that range, you know, White, Pacheco, Connor, I mean, guys that are fine, but it really fell flat at that Waller pick.
And one of the things that is another one of these trade-offs of the Avalanche draft, or at least something that does cause some issues for you, is that if you don't get in on the Denver running backs, and obviously we chose to pick Doubs at that spot, I mean, really the value you get at running back, the chance that you have to make a pick that in previous years would have never been available, it's almost exclusively really in round 3. It's not like it cascades throughout the rest of the draft. If you don't hit that bell cow, that legendary upside guy in round 3, then, I mean, you're basically just looking at running backs who are shot guys and aren't that much better than the 0 RB options who are going to be available many, many rounds later.
So looking at our team with 6 wide receivers, do you think this team has a 7th wide receiver in it, or are you kind of leaning toward being good with this room?
I think it could go either way. I still prefer to get the 7th wide receiver with this particular one, since I mean, guys like Dotson and Doubs have plenty of risk. And even if they have good seasons, we might not see them have those consistently scoring weeks. So to fill the 3 spots, to give yourself some more options at the flex, I think that if we have another receiver, we shouldn't avoid that. One of the great things about this particular build is it does give us just so many different options. We don't have to find the best pick at a specific position. But late in 3 at both tight end, QB, good ways to do it. Obviously, we got some slightly earlier guys at those 2 positions today, though, too.
We're on the clock here at 13-9. Some tight ends up here: Tank Bigsby, Roschon, Tyler Algier, some interesting names. Also some wide receivers I know we like as well. What do you like on this board?
I think to go with Bigsby or to come back with Samuel.
Yeah, let's do Bigsby here. Talk to me a little bit about Bigsby. Don't know if I've heard you give kind of, I know you like ETN. I assume though this is just a backfield you are interested in targeting both at cost.
It is, and they've signaled similar to the thing with Charbonnet, where, I mean, Bigsby is going to be very involved, and that is unfortunate for the ETN thesis, because he's one of these guys where if you're talking about a new Jamal Charles, then I mean, it's Travis Etienne, and you'd like to see the team commit to that and say, we've got a guy who can change the game every single week, and he's going to get the touches to do that, as opposed to saying, you know, we're gonna have a committee. Committees are the way to go. But if that's what the rhetoric is from the team, you have to respect a little bit. Bigsby, I think, someone who has been inflated slightly in terms of the talent, but the flexibility that he brings and the chance to really lock down a big portion of, I mean, he's going to be the RB2. He's going to get a lot of touches at that price. You have that, plus then you have obviously the contingent upside with the injury. It's hard to go away from him there.
Yep. I agree. I like Bigsby in that range. So our 4 running backs now through 14 rounds, Jahmyr Gibbs, DeAndre Swift, Rashaad Penny, Tank Bigsby, through 13 rounds. We're about to pick here on the clock at 14-4. You had mentioned Curtis Samuel when we were on the clock before. He does go here. I also, of course, like Tyquan Thornton and Wan'Dale Robinson. I'm pretty sure you like those guys as well. Or would this be another running back pick for you?
I don't know that any of the running backs move the needle here compared to guys who should be available at the next turn. If you have a DeAndre Hopkins who gets dropped in on top of Thornton, then it really changes his entire play. But I mean, I don't know that that's going to happen. So
I did it of selecting Wan'Dale Robinson, 2, because I was trying to do the classic interpreting Shawn's tea leaves there on the fly. The reason I did break the tie there, in addition to you mentioning that there could be some Thornton Hopkins risk, is we did make a bet on the Giants with Darren Waller as well. So I did go ahead and grab Wan'Dale Robinson there. Would you still, if you had more time to think it through, would Thornton still have been the guy for you over Robinson?
Well, I have so much Thornton that I think...
Me too.
And I like that because he's just going to keep getting more expensive. So if you have somebody who is at like an absurd 50, 60% exposure at this point, I mean, he's going to rise to where you get 0 the entire rest of the way.
Right.
So it's going to balance it back out. But I mean, the other thing here is that if Hopkins doesn't land on him, Juju's already hurt. I mean, Juju's not going to do anything. So you have, I mean, Thornton is the wide receiver 1 in an offense that's going to make a big jump. I mean, his price is kind of silly.
Yeah, but I need you hyping up Wan'Dale Robinson because that's who we selected, Shawn.
Right, Wan'Dale. Wan'Dale is somebody that Colin Kelly and I have been selecting in some of our FFPC Superflex drafts. We've got a player here who, and you and I selected him previously.
Yeah.
I think on our first draft. The real question there is, what's the timeline? You had mentioned with Rashod Bateman, maybe if he misses the first month, but then you get a guy at a great value who's going to come out and score. I think that Robinson as the 7th receiver there is pretty palatable because you have so much potential over the second half of the year for him to be the one. And when you go back through and you look at what he did his final year in college and where he was drafted, just very undervalued. Last year, it was disappointing. He was one of my 3 highest exposures, and then he basically didn't play. And so you do have that portion that is frustrating. And yet when he did play, he was electric. He's got a broader profile, I think, than a lot of drafters are giving him credit for. He should be from a contingent perspective. I mean, he's either going to hit and is a league winner, or he's a 7th receiver who maybe only has a couple decent weeks. If you're talking about just a couple decent weeks, you prefer that to come out like your 17th and 18th picks as opposed to right here. But we know that, I mean, you can do nothing all season and then catch a touchdown like Tyquan did at the key moment, and then you're the guy.
There you go. All right, our team here to recap for the audio listeners, whether you're listening on the Rotoviz airwaves or watching here on the Pete Overzet YouTube channel. This is the Best Ball Banana Stand with Pete Overzet and Shawn Siegele. Our team so far: Tua at quarterback, running backs Jahmyr Gibbs, DeAndre Swift, Rashaad Penny, and Tank Bigsby. Our wide receivers: Garrett Wilson, Jaylen Waddle, Keenan Allen, Deontay Johnson, Jahan Dotson, Romeo Doubs, Wan'Dale Robinson. We did not let ourselves get buried in an avalanche today. And at tight end, Darren Waller and Greg Dulcich. Looks like we're going to have some nice options coming up here as far as quarterbacks, running backs. Should have a decent part of the board available to us here.
And this draft has worked out very nicely in that we were able to get the receivers we needed, and yet we also have some elite guys at the other positions. Not to say this draft was any less tight. I think when we go back and evaluate it from a big picture perspective, it will show to be, but it's nice to not be as locked out as we were the first couple times.
Yep. We have Jerome Ford come off the board and Chuba, 2 of our favorites here. Any love for Foreman, Jeff Wilson, anything jumping out to you? We could lock up Kenny Pickett here with Deontay Johnson, or we can wait on that. What do you like?
Well, let's put Kenny Pickett in there, and then can you go to the running backs purely? Just running backs. Let's stick with Pickett, and if we do run into an issue with some of these other late guys that we've set up, then this Tua Pickett, I've got a lot of Pickett, but it has mostly been not with Tua. And so to have Deontay Johnson and Pickett on a draft that's on this side, as opposed to coming out of a top 4 selection, I like that. Chuba was the guy that I wanted. He went 1 pick ahead of us.
I know. Yeah. And you had just wrote up Jerome Ford today. Highly recommend checking out this piece on Rotoviz. Shawn writing about the Cleveland Browns and how the 2 later picks at both running back and wide receiver might actually be the better selections than the earlier picks. Highly recommend checking that out. What do you like now, Shawn, after we take Kenny Pickett?
Well, you like the Chase Brown plunge here?
I also don't mind. I mean, I like Jeff Wilson if we're building out a bet on the Dolphins, but talk to me about Chase Brown as well. Do you prefer Chase Brown to Wilson?
I think that I do.
Talk about Chase Brown. I think my worry with Chase Brown right now is that that Travion Williams is in fact maybe the 2 there, and we don't have a ton of clarity on it right now. It sounds like you feel pretty strongly though that Chase Brown will be that 2.
No, I think that when he's available here in the 16th in a spot where we don't have another clear pick. And the only reason I'd be a little bit off Wilson, and you can correct me if this is dramatically changed in the last 24 hours, but I would still be pretty concerned about Dalvin Cook there. So with already being probably the third guy, then I don't want to be the fourth guy when we select him. I think that we can wait and we're going to still be good on Mostert and Wilson shares.
Yeah, I really hope that Dalvin Cook doesn't go there, because I'm pretty sure I have like 50% total Miami Dolphins exposure in my drafts. I know why people get excited or see the Dalvin Cook connection, and I will acknowledge it's a possibility, but just the way that they've handled the running back position over the years, retaining those two free agents, bringing in Devin Achane with decent draft capital, it just seems really weird that they're then going to pay Dalvin Cook as much as he wants to get paid, where he's demanding a certain amount of money. It just doesn't seem like their MO. So I'm a little less worried about it. But to your point, Jeff Wilson is sliding in drafts. I think I got him at pick 191 in a draft. And people, I think, are planning for that potentially happening.
So we have a little bit of the concern there. Brown has an ADP in a range where it can be a little bit more challenging to get him. I think Travion is the guy that you want to be on. So it probably is a little bit weird to say, let's take Chase Brown, but I think I'm going to end up with so much Travion that if you get Brown in a spot where you didn't like anybody else, you go ahead and balance it out a little bit right there. As I'm looking at our ADP tool, I mean, Travion's still not really going in many drafts. It might be the case that this is exactly a time when you need to get on him. I'm thinking that we're going to have some of these drafts in the future where we're desperately looking for that 18th round pick, and it's going to be just automatic for Williams.
Yeah. I also thought you were going to maybe, if you're going to float maybe I don't want to say off the wall, but running back selection, I thought maybe you would have gravitated to Ty Chandler as a Minnesota bring back there with our Green Bay stuff. Was he in contention for you too?
He is. I'm still trying to get a great feel for where those guys are going to go, where I want to pick them. He's not the only option to play that at the end of drafts here.
Yep. Our guy Serum does take Sam Howell here, so we'll have to think through if this is still a 3-quarterback build, or if we're happy with Tua and Pickett. Looking at the board here, did someone take Trey McBride? Wow, he's normally always available. I was going to be interested in McBride as a little bring back with our Eagles stuff. He is gone. So some of our favorites, as is known to happen here, getting wiped out. Anything jumping out to you?
I like Mayer. He has been kind of the lost guy and is another option for having one of these rookie tight ends that we're seeing it move a little bit more in the direction where those guys can make a difference. You think about Trey McBride with the big week 17 last year. Obviously, Dulcich had the stretch where he played well. People very excited about what Pitts did as a rookie, not so much what he did last season. But then when you think about Kincaid and LaPorta and where they're being priced, what the opportunity really is in that offense, especially if Devontae Adams maybe does a little bit of an Allen Robinson. I mean, that's not going to happen. But you have opportunity there. They want to prop him up. Mayer is an elite prospect. Kind of a fun way to go.
This feels like a running back pick to me, Shawn. 5 running backs and kind of a 0 RB-ish room. I put 3 guys in the queue who are interesting to me, both from correlation and prospect stuff. I'm guessing you like these guys too. McBride, Izzy, Pierce Strong. Anyone else, or do you have a favorite of these?
Well, I think McBride, for the reasons that you mentioned with Chandler. And for me, these two guys are really close. Ty Chandler was one of my favorite picks last season. That didn't work out in part because he was hurt and the starters were healthy, which is a scenario that plays out sometimes, even though we tend to think about, okay, the starters get hurt, the backups, are not really out there taking the in-game hits. So they stay healthy and then they go in and they steal reps at the key moment. It doesn't always happen that way. It doesn't mean that Chandler is not still the athletic guy that they drafted. However, I mean, Dwayne McBride, if he had been healthy through the draft process, there were a lot of scouts who felt like he could be the 4th guy after Charbonnet. I don't know that that was ever really in the mindset of the NFL front offices, because I think he would have gone a little bit earlier to one of these teams if that were the case. And yet the article that I wrote last week after the Vikings released Cook discusses a lot of the ways in which Alexander Mattison has weaknesses. We tend to think about him as an elite handcuff and a guy ready to make the jump and to fill in and be a star because he hit on those opportunities when he was the guy. But in the same way that, you think back to the Browns, for example, and how some of their guys, you have that Hunt Chubb situation when one of them was hurt, the other one didn't elevate the way that you might think. And yet that doesn't mean that Nick Chubb wasn't good or that wasn't the most likely thing to happen. You have to look at the overall profile. Alexander Madison's peripherals are terrible. They're not, okay to where you're saying, okay, it's not a talent bet. I mean, they're actually bad. And so from that perspective, when you're covered up by a guy who is better in space in Chandler, a guy who's probably a better early down runner in McBride, there's a lot of risk for him. There's a ton of opportunity for the backups. I think you want to be on the backups. And yet, if you get to the end of the season and Madison is the guy who stayed healthy, and because he's got that experience as an NFL player, the Vikings in a situation where they're mostly going to pass anyway. And so they want a safe guy. I mean, it could be Madison for just the whole thing, but you're going to need to get a lot of exposure to those two Vikings backs at the very end of drafts. And I think that round 18 is the place to do it.
Yeah, and if you want to hear Shawn expand on that backfield, Shawn did have a piece out earlier in the week looking specifically at Madison, Ty Chandler, and Dwayne McBride, breaks down everything from a profile perspective and then also how to play it in drafts. Highly recommend checking that out, as well as the most recent Cleveland Browns article that he has up on the site. And you can also go back into the archives looking at the Best Ball Workshop, where he dives in to a lot of the tactics and strategies we've been employing in these drafts. I do want to recap our team here. Draft number 53 in the books for me. Ended up with a 2-6-7-3 build. Tua and Kenny Pickett at quarterback, getting both those guys as slight ADP values, stacked up with Waddle and Deontay Johnson. Our running back room, a pretty fun kind of modified 0 RB room here with Jahmyr Gibbs, DeAndre Swift, Rashod Penny, Tank Bigsby, Chase Brown, Dwayne McBride. Nothing says Rotoviz to me like a bunch of rookies and DeAndre Swift on a team, as well as Penny. Love that. Wide receiver, Garrett Wilson, Jaylen Waddle, Keenan Allen, Deontay Johnson, Jahan Dotson, Romeo Doubs, Wan'Dale Robinson. A really nice mix here of veterans we feel good about, as well as second-year breakout candidates here. Look at all of that. It is basically all veterans and second-year breakouts. I guess Waddle is our one third-year guy there. Tight end, Darren Waller, past ADP, Greg Dulcich, and Michael Mayer. Maybe not as loaded up to the gills with as much correlation as we would have liked, missing out on an Arizona bring back. But for the most part, Shawn, I like how this team shook out.
Yeah, and we went ahead and took Pickett so that we were protected against that Howell selection. And I mean, for me personally, I'm going to have so much Howell that if I miss on him in a few drafts, I think that is okay. I made a big pitch for mid-draft, which may not have been the smartest thing to do. The thing we might go back and change with that would simply to be take Tyler Lockett, right? And yet I do think that JSN creates a lot of risk for those two guys, a lot more risk for Metcalf at his price than for Lockett at his price. But otherwise, the draft went almost perfectly. The one we did last week, Pete, as you mentioned, just was crazy in terms of how much correlation we could push into it. This draft, I think, is one of those where you look back and you're trying to figure out, well, how would you put together? And I'm not in any way saying that like we're going to win the regular season with this, but I think there are some echoes to what King Cap did with his team last year. You mentioned at the wide receiver position, the volume and then the breakout guys. And that's really what I want to have, are those second-year players who are going to be drafted much earlier a year from now. And then if we're looking at veterans, it's veterans who seem substantially undervalued. I talk a lot about talent and a lot about what you can do with the targets, but Keenan Allen and Deontay Johnson, from a target perspective, you look at the volume that they're going to have. I mean, they should be going much, much, much earlier. Doesn't mean that they're going to hit, but I think that the risk reward is skewed in our favor on those picks.
Yeah, I like how this one turned out here. Fun draft number 53 in the books here on the Best Ball Banana Stand. It's a weekly show with me, Peter Overzet, and Shawn Siegele from Rotoviz, where we will draft in Best Ball Mania 4, chasing that $3 million top prize, making provocative selections. The chat, how could you take Garrett Wilson over Stephon Diggs? This is why I love drafting with Shawn, because we get to really interesting discussions and how we, myself included, can often get very anchored to RB or to ADP. And I love how much Shawn pushes me outside of the box. I appreciate you guys hanging out with us today. A few plugs on my end. As I mentioned, Ship Chasing will be live tonight at 9:15 p.m. Eastern. Leone and I are going to go for a run while drafting. We're going to draft a team on the Swolecast today at 1:30 as well. I've been told I'm getting a secret challenge that I must accomplish in my draft, so you can tune in for that. Always a good time. Be sure to check out the new Best Ball tools over at FantasyLife. Free suite of tools, checking your exposures, looking at your combos, your stacks. Maybe Shawn and I can review some of the teams that we've drafted as the summer progresses, looking at kind of the texture and how those are shaking out and evolving as we go. Shawn, anything else that people should be looking out for up on Rotoviz this coming week?
Well, to start with, from a podcasting perspective, Ben and I had a great time recording Stealing Bananas, and it was very much about exactly what we just did, which is working through underdog and how to make your player targets work with the structure. What's the most exploitable in 2023? That was a lot of fun to do. Colin Kelly and I recorded a Superflex FFPC tournament team against the listeners, and obviously when you go against the listeners, you get some crazy drafts. We made some provocative selections in that one. But Pete, I appreciate you mentioning those two articles that were out. Did some player pieces, have been focusing so much on best ball strategy that it was a lot of fun to make a little detour, dive into some of the players. It kind of really refreshes your mindset and gets you to think in a little bit different way when you dive deeply into the players. And I think it always comes back to the players. You have to have player targets that will work. The seasons that I've had the most success are when the evaluations on the players and their evidence-based evaluations really fit with what we want to do structurally, and that just amplified everything. So there are a couple of things out like that, but we've got the best ball tools with the Underdog Advanced Rate Explorer, the Underdog Roster Construction Explorer, a lot more workshop pieces using those two tools coming out. And those are just two of the approximately 40 tools we have over at Rotoviz. We'd love to have everybody come check them out.
Awesome. Yeah, you guys should definitely be checking it out. I have links down below to the Rotoviz YouTube channel, to Shawn's work over at Rotoviz, and all the other great work being done by the writers over there. It really is the best bang for your buck sub in all of fantasy sports. Highly recommend it. Speaking of Ben Gretchen, I haven't got a chance to listen to that Stealing Bananas yet, which I'm very excited to do so. But I'm doing a doubleheader with our friend Ben Gretch on Thursday night. He's going to join me for a randomizer draft. And then immediately following the shows I've been doing for YouTube members, the Best Ball After Dark series, which, we'll probably end up drafting, but for the most part, it's been a chance for me to catch up with friends in the industry. We talk about content, dad life, all that kind of stuff, health, exercise, everything ancillary to what we're doing here. And very excited to have a fun night with Gretch on my channel. It's also my birthday. So Gretch and I are going to have some cocktails, do a randomizer draft, Best Ball After Dark. If you're a YouTube member, you can get access to that Best Ball After Dark interview series. Have been getting a lot of good feedback on that. So recommend supporting the channel and getting access to those videos. I appreciate all of you. I will catch you at the Swolecast here in a little bit. For Shawn, I'm Pete. This has been the Best Ball Banana Stand. We'll see you guys next Wednesday.